We are here with a quick tip video on working with some of the intricacies of math.random. Because math.random can be used to generate a random double value, but generally in our programs it's more useful to be able to generate a random integer, and specifically we want to control the range within which we generate that integer. So there's sort of this formula you can work with, which allows you to first create a random double. And then depending on what range of random numbers you want, you multiply your double times that range and then cast it into an int. But when I put 4 as the range, we're actually going to end up with a range from 0 to 3. Because my random number is going to be from 0 to 0.99999. It's never actually going to be 1. And so cast to an int where it's truncated, so it's always going to be floored or rounded down, we're not actually going to ever get 4. We're going to get either a 0, 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes, though, you might not just want a range of numbers, you might actually want a range of even numbers. So the way to do that is instead of just multiplying times the range, after you multiply times the range, you can perform another transformation where you multiply times 2. So instead of getting from 0 to 3, in this case, we're actually going to get from 0 to 6, all even numbers. Well, let's say you wanted actually 0 through 4, but all even numbers. You'd have to reduce this range. So now, our range generated by this multiplication is going to be 0, 1, or 2. And then our range of even numbers is going to be 0, 2, or 4. And then you may notice that I'm also adding on this minimum here. Well, our minimum basically tells us, okay, this is the smallest number we're going to get, because the smallest we can get from this part of the equation is 0. So when we add on the minimum, if it's 0, then our minimum, our possible smallest number is 5. And so if you think about it, in this case, we're not actually getting a range of even numbers, because when you add an even number onto an odd number, you're always going to get an odd number. Which brings me to my last point, which is that if you wanted to generate a range of odd numbers, you first need to add 1. And that would be establishing that, okay, we've got our even numbers, and then we add 1 onto them, which gives us our range of odd numbers. And then if you wanted to update and say, change to have a different minimum value, well, then you could add on your separate minimum. So I would actually do a +1 here, and then add my minimum. But you have to be a little careful with minimum, because if you try to add another odd number, that's actually going to shift it so that you end up with an even number. I know that's a little complicated, but the basic thing to understand here is that by multiplying times a range, and then multiplying by 2, you can generate even numbers. And then by adding 1, you can shift those to being odd numbers. So by adding, you shift your range. By multiplying, you either stretch or shrink your range. And then by multiplying by 2 or adding 1, we can change it from either being a range of even numbers or a range of odd numbers. All right, that's your quick tip. Continue to practice with math.random. That's the only way to get better with it. And hopefully you'll be generating random numbers in no time.